Hi, I am Hannah Del Toro, licensed clinical social worker, and I am coming to you today to bring an important topic that there is not enough information about in our communities, which is preventing and addressing and healing child sexual abuse. So I am bringing this today because there is very little comprehensive information available online or in other places that I've looked to help parents and caregivers, even therapists that want to tackle this difficult subject. So I wanted to put this information out there in as comprehensive of a way as possible this way. So, um, the topics that this particular video is going to include are where abuse takes place, who abuses, prevention, warning signs that something has happened, the outcry itself, and the healing process. So, to begin, we're going to talk about where abuse takes place and who abuses. So, statistics tell us that this usually happens within our circle. So, it's not often a distant stranger, though there is some online predatory behavior that we are all becoming aware of these days. But at this time, it's thought that it's usually somebody within your community, within your circles. So, this can take place within a family, with extended relatives, um, overnight slumber parties, childcare, churches, any religious or spiritual institution. There are a lot of forms of yoga where um, I think of like Kundalini yoga right now as one that it's being implicated. That there's child sexual abuse that has taken place by the leaders and in the communities that have been unacknowledged and unaddressed. So it can be yoga groups, it can be any religion, um, scouts clubs, any clubs that kids are a part of. It can be online grooming or anyone that your family knows that has access to your child. The statistics tell us that 1 in 10 children will be abused by age 18, which is a pretty high number. And what this means is that most likely we all know somebody who has been through child sexual abuse. And that's why it is important to have as much comprehensive information out there about this, sometimes um, uncomfortable to talk about subject. So it's important to know that this happens to both boys and girls. And I'm not going to go into this specifically in here, but if you go to places like the Protection, Center for Child Protection, or other sites like that that have blogs or articles on grooming, I recommend looking up those blogs or articles on grooming so that you can be familiar with what that is and how that takes place and recognize the signs of if somebody is grooming your child or grooming children. So, for prevention with young children, I found and really, really like this book, which is I Said No. Um, it is a kid to kid guide to keep private parts private. This is an excellent book to read with young children to help them understand about privacy, about red flags, about feeling unsafe, all of those types of subjects. So, this is highly recommended for prevention. It's also a good idea to make a rule in the home that we're not going to do any secrets, only surprises. And if anyone tells you to keep a secret, you tell your mom or dad or caregiver or a trusted adult as soon as it's safe. So, helping kids understand it can be tricky when someone tells them to keep a secret, but it's not okay for a friend or adult to ask them to do so. So, my kids will repeat the language of no, no secrets, only surprises, but no secrets. Um, a concerning trend here is porn on phones that teens and kids get access to, sometimes not knowing what to do with those graphic images and so acting them out. So, for several parents I've worked with this subject on, um, that was a part of their story was that an older neighbor, older child cousin, older person had porn on their phone and acted it out with the younger child. So that is really common. So it's important to stay engaged in what your kids are looking at and helping them to understand and ask healthy questions and get healthy answers, and to again a kid to kid guide of keeping private parts private. So learning about their body parts, learning how to protect themselves and keep them, and know when to get a safe adult involved in a situation. So it's also important to just be aware with teens and kids, if they have access to phones, what content they are looking at, because that's a becoming a very large issue in our communities that isn't out there. Also, it's important in this prevention part of it, it's important to prevent this cycle of abuse. So a lot of times the abuse was never addressed or healed. Um, and it's passed on in that same secretive, kind of scary manner that it occurred in. Um, so again, it's a coping mechanism for kids to act out what they've been through. So so an older child acting out with a younger child, or that type of situation, keeping an eye on if you see some sexual acting out in a kid, asking them with curiosity and compassion. Okay, I see you're doing that. Let's talk about keeping private parts private, um, how to explore bodies in private. We can't explore other people's bodies. Is something going on with this? So, curiosity and compassion and asking tough questions is really important to do. And that's hard because people naturally shut down and go into denial in the face of these situations. When we're talking about child sexual abuse, a lot of people just go into denial and shut down. So it makes the toxic secrecy of this abuse that much more toxic. So ask some of the hard questions, have some of the hard conversations, to make sure that kids know how to keep themselves safe and how to get help when they need. And that is very important for prevention. So, next, we're going to talk about warning signs that something has happened. What I want to say at the beginning of this is first, don't assume that it hasn't happened or it won't happen to you or your family. Even if you're a police officer, a counselor, a social worker, a community leader, a teacher, somebody who's really well educated, somebody doing trainings about this can happen 1 in 10, right? So this can happen to anyone's family. And I don't see that to be scary, just to raise awareness um, that nobody is really immune from the risk with child sexual abuse, and to be aware and have the difficult conversations again and ask things with curiosity and compassion. So, one sign that children will show is not wanting to go somewhere, or go with someone. So, if children are showing symptoms or signs or resistance of going to a family member's home, friends' homes, neighbors' homes, church gatherings, whatever it may be, religious gatherings, listen to that. If you are noticing some strong signs of resistance, that is a red flag that something might have happened. Another red flag is children not eating or sleeping well and increased nightmares. A lot of times there can be wetting the bed, often well past the potty training years, and difficulty pottying. So it's important to know that, for some children, maybe they got out of bed at a slumber party and something happened there. And so they're terrified to get out of bed. And so bedwetting occurs at ages that would not normally occur. So that's a red flag. Something might be going on. Also, if there are changes in social behaviors, so if you've got a really outgoing kid who suddenly becomes shy or gets really overly clingy, or has strong needs in ways that they didn't before, that's also a red flag that something might have occurred. And also playing out the abuse. So, an older child kind of acting some of this out in some way that you notice, with other dolls or toys or kids. Play that you're like, wait, something's off here. Um, I want to say something about that type of play. That is children they're not trying to hurt each other or hurt anyone or do anything bad. They're trying to figure out what happened to them. Children play out what happened to them, which we'll get to later, why it's incredibly important to have a play therapist on board because that version of playing out can stop once you get a healthy play therapist on board, who helps them understand and helps them get out their feelings and deal with that. So, again, play therapists are the direction to go because that's naturally how children indicate something is going on with them. So, the outcry itself, sometimes the first thing to be revealed is the threat to keep the child silent, and then the rest might take time to come, and let your children take that time. So, a lot of police officers are familiar with, okay, this child just revealed a threat. Within the next week or so, the rest might come out. So the child may need a ton of reassurance that if they tell the secret they were told to keep, they won't have to go back around that person or place again. There can be some really strong fears of threats if threats were involved to them or their family. So if they were told that someone would come kill their parents or kill them or come in their house and hurt them, you know, they can lock that in and believe that. So it is important that they get that reassurance of you will not be around that person again. You will not be in that place again. We will not go there. My job as mom and dad, mom and mom, dad and dad, caretaker, grandparent, whatever your family structure is to keep the child safe. And so reassuring them, I'm going to keep you safe and it's okay to share with me what's going on. With really young children, it may be easiest to ask them to show you what happened. So they may act out the threat of hurting, of being hurt or being hurt or hurting someone, or, they told me they'd do this to me. So sometimes they can't put it into words yet. So they will play it out, they'll act it out. And sometimes it'll be the threat, again, that comes out first. They may have conflicting feelings about the person that hurt them. Again, that's a subject for if a child has been groomed, they may have conflicting feelings about caring for the person that has hurt them. So do your best at this point to not ask a ton of questions or any guiding questions. Do your best to support them in what they're sharing. So there is that fact that some of this may come out in some really messy, hard ways. The outcry is often one of the hardest parts of this process. So, the very first thing to tell a child that has revealed that they've been sexually abused is this is not your fault. That may seem absolutely obvious, but it has to be stated. And it needs to be stated sometimes again and again. They need to be reminded and told that they did not do anything wrong. Most people who've been a victim of some type of assault internalize, I must have done something to be in that situation or that to happen. And children do the same. And they need to hear very clearly, often repeatedly, this was not your fault. They need to be told that they are loved and cared for and safe. They need to be told they were brave for telling. So reminded that they are loved, they're safe, they're going to be okay, and they were brave for telling. They're not going to go around that person. They're not going to have to go back to that place. They're going to be okay, and this was not their fault. So after the outcry, you want to notify police. The police are going to provide a case number and often schedule a forensic interview for the child at the Center for Child Protection closest to a family. And that's here in at least Texas, that's how that happens. So ask how to best prepare yourself, your child, the family for the interview. Ask any questions about how that process is going to work. A lot of times there are a lot of social workers and people who put a lot of thought into how to make that as safe and supported of a process as it possibly can be for the child going through that interview. So you can ask about what that's going to look like. Who's going to be there? Where will you be? Can the child come to you if they need reassurance? Any of those questions, it's okay to ask those. So know that more details may come out once the secret is shared. So once they've shared the threat, once they've shared the initial outcry, more may continue to come. You can look for a counselor for your child during that time. A play therapist is best. But sometimes starting that process is best right after the forensic interview. So make sure you check with the therapist, with the play therapist or the center that's going to conduct the interview. Parents and caregivers are going to need support as well. Sometimes there is victims compensation is funding. Sometimes the Center for Child Protection will have funding that can help for the counseling. And if there's a social worker assigned to your case, you can ask them what resources are available for education, for support, for therapy for your child, and then for your family as well. It's good for everyone to get a lot of support. I'm going to cover that in a few ways. Sorry, I'm going to take a drink of water. Um, so know that this is kind of a tough part of it to cover. Um, but this is unfortunately often the case. Know that most of the time, people and places are going to deny that this happened. It can be really painful to have that kind of denial come from a childcare center, a church, a family, a neighbor that you once knew and trusted. It's pretty rare that I have seen a family that has gone through this actually get some restorative justice. More often than not, institutions and people go into denial and shut down. And that is an unfortunate part of this that happens. So, when it happens, when the systems protect their accused child or adult or teen, um, and they shut down and the justice system kind of says, lets you know that that's the case. Unfortunately, to explain this a little bit more, um, that part is going to need to be left to the professionals and the police that are involved in your case to handle that. A lot of times people want to know that other children won't go through this or get some sense of justice or just acknowledgement that this has happened. And when institutions and people don't get that, that can be really hard, kind of a hard next step of this. But know that at that point, if you've involved police, if you've involved professionals in it, then hopefully the institutions are putting safeguards in place for other children. Hopefully, there are enough healthy adults in those places that are going to put safeguards in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. That becomes those professionals' responsibility. And at that point, for you and your family, um, you have to let go of that justice side and focus on protection and healing of the trauma. Focus on protecting your child and healing the trauma and healing the family. And a lot of times, the justice system, it becomes a word of a child against an older child or a teenager or an adult. And there just isn't enough evidence for the justice side to continue moving forward. So that doesn't mean the abuse didn't happen. That doesn't mean that it's not real or valid. That just means that they didn't have enough evidence to continue pushing the case forward. And again, that can be really hard for families to go through that part of it. So sometimes the details coming out can get pretty messy. The child may defend the person, they may change their mind about what happened, they may play out the scenarios in confusing ways. Depending on the age of outcry, they may try to act it out in different ways again to try to figure out what happened. So you may need to be careful with friend and sibling play for a little bit when this is all coming out. Once a child is in play therapy and getting the help they need and the family's getting the help they need, a lot of times, that kind of vigilance you can let go of some of that hypervigilance once everybody's getting the help and support that's needed, including the child that has a safe place to kind of get the safe container around what has happened to them and what's going on. And again, the reminder that, that is a child just trying to figure out what happened to them and they need compassion and support and care as you all move through this sometimes messy and difficult process. So it's really normal for parents to feel guilty about not realizing sooner or noticing some more signs. Sometimes a parent will be like, oh my gosh, this came out and I should have noticed this and this and this and this and this, and I should have put it all together. That's very normal. Um, so, this is again a family trauma. And just as the child needs to know that this was not their fault, um, a lot of times the parents need counseling and support to let them know that it is also not their fault that someone abused their child. So forgiving oneself for what you didn't know is some of the most important therapeutic work that the parent and caregiver can do. Um, and that's really important. That self forgiveness is super important for the healing process for the family because parents can really carry that sense of, I wish I could have stopped this or prevented it or known or intervened sooner. The intensity of the pain during these stages I'm describing, during the outcry, um, and kind of dealing with the interventions, initial interventions, the intensity of that pain does fade, but it can feel in that time like it is so intense that it's going to last forever. So it's important to know that healing is possible for the child, for the parents, for the family. Also, it's important to know that healing may move differently for different people in the family as you work through the stages of grief. So, if we think about Kubler Ross and her famous stages of grief, you have denial, and then bargaining, and then anger, and then sadness, and then acceptance, right? So, um, not that that's a linear process, but those are generally the processes. So, it's important to know that, one parent may be in denial while another is in anger, and so sometimes marriage counseling is appropriate. Sometimes two individual counselors for the parents are appropriate, and then marriage counseling, and then family counseling. So get good professionals on board that can help you figure out individual needs, family needs, all of those. Um, for healing, again, certified play therapists are recommended for younger children. You may want to interview a few and listen to your instincts of who your child will be the best fit with. Continuing to work on empowering your child and providing education and guidance. And continue to remind your child again, it's not their fault that this happened. There are some really awesome and helpful books. I actually brought them this time. In earlier takes, I kept forgetting them. But there is A Terrible Thing Happened by Margaret Holmes, is one of the books. And Healing Days, which is my personal favorite, by Susan Farber Straus. I hope I said that correctly. So those are a couple of good healing books for kids that have experienced trauma. Um, and um, Though I've used these books actually with teenagers and adults that needed some of the messages that these books contained. Um, and reminding them that it's okay to talk to their counselor about anything that they need to. So, talking about these books and then reminding them you can talk to your safe adults. Safe adults are the ones you go talk to. Reminding kids it's okay to talk to counselors is important. While it's scary to wonder what impact this might have on your child, on your family, when you are working with good professionals, you're going to learn a lot of healing lessons in this as well. Like your child at an early age learns how to reach for help when needed, who can be trusted, how to not keep toxic secrets, how to love each other as a family through pain and difficulty, resilience, developing instincts and intuitions about who and how to trust and when to get help. So the family may get some instincts about, well, if something feels off here, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that activity. We're not going to engage in this situation. So there is a lot of healing that can come out of this that can set kids up for a lot of success in life at getting help and support that they need. It's important to know that a lot of kids just want to feel normal with their friends and in their life. It's important to help them restore that sense of normalcy, reminding them they're safe, they're loved, they're able to speak up when bad things happen and get the help that they need, and that there are plenty of good people in the world and plenty of helpers. So, really working with kids on identifying who feels like a safe person, who feels like somebody you can talk to. Really working on that is going to set them up for a lot of success in life. Also, just to kind of end on this, that it's normal for this to come up again at different stages in life with new sets of questions, or I guess when a child hits puberty and then once they begin to date as a teenager. Um, that's when some of these questions can come up again, or when they learn that it's happened to others. It's healthy to remind kids that they can talk about it or get the help that they need when this comes up. So to let them know that, even if they finish their work with a play therapist, that anytime this becomes something that you have questions about or need help or support around, let's get you the help and support, which is a great way for kids to build resilience, knowing who to go to and letting people help them with difficult issues. So there is a lot of healing that can happen around this very difficult subject. So that is where I'm going to end this video presentation. I look forward to answering questions about this and getting this information out there to help families that have been through this. And again, as some guidance for therapists, as some guidance for caregivers that needed more information about this difficult subject. Um, Thank you so much.